Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me in another of my amazing interviews. Today, we want to find out about NetZero. Now, you may have seen earlier today I posted an interview with a chap called Roger Arthur, and we went into the very detailed scientific case for why net zero is a bit laughable and couldn't possibly happen. And yet we still question why the world, and indeed our government, wants to do it. So in order to get to there, I thought it'd be great to talk to somebody who is on the ground, who is in the Conservative, but a councillor who deals with everyday people, you know, bins and dog poo and things like that. He probably won't appreciate me saying that, but that's where you start when you're a councillor. His name is Matthew Goodwin-Freeman. He is a councillor for Harrow, and he joins me now. Hello, Matthew.
Hi, Richard. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you very much. I'm sorry about sort of illustrating some of the harder parts of the job.
No, look,
That
you're
you,
you're completely right. It's one of the most thankless jobs that you can get as a local councillor. But I absolutely love it because you get to see the difference overnight. You can really make a difference to your local community, and that's what I really, really enjoy.
and it's fascinating that you are a councillor because we were speaking to some chaps in Thetford earlier this year. They had the May elections, and one of the chaps, Chris Brooks, got in as a councillor, and it's so nice to see that real people can get in and make that difference as he is, with perhaps views that are not the narrative of the main party, and it helps just shake people up a bit and maybe gets them to see a different side of the coin. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Harrow had our elections last May, not this May. We were the only Conservative gain from Labour in the entire country, and we focus solely on local things. I'm a local person from the local area. I live in, the town where I grew up, the area in which I grew up as a kid and in school and friends. It's weird driving past houses where we used to live as a family and seeing what people have done to them since. But I think also the benefit of being a local councillor is you really hear from the doorstep what people are thinking, and it's interesting to see sometimes when that differs to what number 10 and government are saying. And I think it gives you a really interesting position where you are as close to the electorate as you can be.
Well, we're going to find out a little bit more about how what the local real people are thinking, and how perhaps that is different from the thinking that goes on in the top job. But before we get to there, of course, local more recent news, I should say, that's gone on has been a by-election in Uxbridge, and the Conservatives hung on, which I suppose is a bit well, it's interesting because I don't know that the Conservatives at the moment are the favour of everybody because of a number of policies that have been coming about. So perhaps it's a surprise. But tell me how that went and what's been the response perhaps from the Labour side.
Yeah, so I've spent the last several weeks helping out in the Uxbridge by-election, going down and trying to secure a Conservative victory. We did win by 495 votes, a very small majority, but no one was expecting us to. We were expecting if you listen to the polls, we would have lost by 20,000 votes. So it was really good to see, and the reason why is because when we were out on the doorsteps and talking to people, we said, what are the things that matter to you? And ULEZ, the ultra low emission expansion that the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, is bringing in next month, that was the number one issue. People in
Really?
Uxbridge and South Rice are absolutely opposed to the £12.50 a day charge. That's £4,500 a year for not driving a compliant car. And then there's the scrappage scheme that people aren't eligible for or get a couple of £1,000 to replace their car and buy an electric car for. It just doesn't work. And that's what people were saying on the doorstep. So immediately the election turned into a referendum on ULEZ. And there we go. The residents in Uxbridge and South Ruislip said no to ULEZ, sent that message to Sadiq Khan and Keir Starmer, and we have a Conservative member of Parliament, Councillor Steve Tuckwell, who I've known for several years, someone from the local area, from the local community, now the member of Parliament for that area.
And do you think if there were more by-elections happening at this time, that similar results would come based on that one policy?
Well, this is the thing. That was the election in London. There were two by-elections elsewhere in the country. And we saw in those by-elections Conservative defeats, and one went to Labour and one went to the Lib Dems. And I think what we saw is a mix of tactical voting, but also a need for those local issues. So ULEZ at the moment, obviously, it sounds like a London issue with the Mayor of London, but
Mm.
other areas in the UK are looking at the mayor's scheme and planning to introduce them. You've got 15-minute cities, for example, in Cambridge. You've got LTNs popping up everywhere, low traffic neighborhoods, which is effectively they put plant pots in the middle of the road and stop ambulances getting by.
I've seen
You've
that in
got
Oxford.
absolutely, you've got Bristol, you've got Birmingham, you've got Manchester, all with clean air zones and looking at expanding those sorts of things. This is an issue that is going to be spreading across the UK. And actually, we know that for a fact because this weekend after the Uxbridge result, Angela Rayner, the deputy for the Labour Party, admitted that Labour would look at introducing ULEZ in other major cities. So, what we've got here is a London issue that is the first step to a national issue. And that's
Yes.
why I think it's so important that the residents of Uxbridge and South Ruislip sent a really clear message to the Mayor of London, who hasn't listened since day one. 66% of the consultation said no, he didn't listen. I think that's where we've got to now. We are having a real crisis of the elected politician not listening to the people.
And so, do you think he will listen now?
Well, I there was a people's question time earlier this year, and I managed to get myself a ticket to it, and I went and I managed to put my hand up and get to ask a question, and I asked the mayor, how can you do this? How is this going to help London? Why aren't you listening to Londoners? He's our mayor. This is people's question time. He needs to listen to the people. And the response I got back to him was a question to answer a question. And he asked me, how much is a child's life? 4,000 children dying a year from air pollution, which we know that the data isn't true on. We know that's not true. And he answered my question with a question, and I wish I realised afterwards I should have said, well, according to him, a child's life is worth £12.50 a day because if you pay £12.50, or if you can afford to pay £12.50 every single day, you can drive whatever vehicle you want as long as you want in that 24-hour period.
And no matter
So
how much it's polluting, presumably.
absolutely. And so I think that's where we've got to. We've got to elected politicians being really out of touch with the people. I'm from Harrow. We have fought this ULEZ with four other boroughs and we've brought on the judicial review. We had that at the start of July and we should get the answer to that judicial review imminently. It could be tonight. It could be as we're talking, there's a breaking news tab. That
Well, if
that would
there
be
is,
an
let me know.
exclusive, wouldn't it?
It would be fantastic.
But yeah,
Uh,
the judge said he's going to try and get the decision by the 31st, before the recess for summer. Fingers crossed we do because this is coming fast, thick and fast in on the 29th of August, and people are really panicking. My inbox as a councillor is full of people saying, "Should I sell my car? Should I wait for the judicial review? I'm not going to get anything from the scrappage scheme. What can I do?"
mm.
And my heart goes out to them because I don't know what to say. This if you look at democracy, you go to a consultation. If people say yes, you go with it. If people say no, you backtrack and you say, okay, I've listened. But
Yes.
all Sadiq Khan has done is completely the opposite.
Well, it does beg the question that when it's time for the next mayor to be inaugurated, will it be him? And
I
I
I
think a lot of people are thinking, not bloody likely.
this is the mayor who is the police and crime commissioner for London, but the Metropolitan Police is in special measures. The London Fire Brigade is in special measures. The London Underground fares are the highest metro fares in the world. Crime is through the roof. He's taxing working class people and ordinary Londoners with this ULEZ scheme, which he's already expanded to the North and South Circular and now expanding to Outer London, where Outer London is greenery, is suburbia. Harrow is metro land. It's not
Mm.
central London. It's skyscrapers and pollution and levels which are
Well,
dangerous
I,
from
I
the.
lived in Harrow many years ago in the 1990s for about a couple of years. So, yeah, I'm familiar with Harrow as not being the centre of London.
It isn't. It's not the centre of London. And this is the mayor who, as well, if you want to travel from Harrow to London, you'll be lucky to get a train if they're not on strike. The fares are so high. And remember, this is a TFL that he's bankrupted during the pandemic, and the government had to provide £6 billion to bail it out. So, by all measures, Sadiq Khan is failing London, and I hope that voters on the 2nd of May 2024 will make that loud and clear.
Well, he doesn't sound like the people's friend to me.
No.
It's amazing that he had 2 terms in the first place. But anyway, now listen, you are a Conservative. If we cut you in half, which I don't propose to do because it'll make a bloody mess, but would it be blue all the way through?
It's one of those weird things. When I was younger, everyone had this. There was this political spectrum test that you could do, and you could answer a bunch of questions, and it would tell you where you are on the political spectrum. And I was slightly to the right, and I was slightly more authoritarian than libertarian, but it was near the middle. I was a centre right conservative. Um,
Right.
so yeah, I think I'm a conservative. I've always been a conservative. I believe in the conservative values of working hard and getting the reward. But
So,
I
so yeah, sorry, I'm just going to interrupt you there because it's always interesting to know what Conservatives, and not what the current party is, because I think anybody in their right mind will realise the values that they're doing today are not the values that perhaps we all voted over the last.
yeah.
Somebody like me might have voted for the last 40 years. But what are the Conservative values in your mind?
For me, being conservative is if you work hard, you should get that reward. If you are the hardest worker out of a group, when a promotion opportunity comes along, you're the one who should get it. I believe that when, life knocks you down, you have to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and take that step forward. I believe it's that personal attitude, that attitude to keep going. The whole saying of keep calm and carry on, I think it's so true. I think it's more as well. It's about pride in your country. I'm so proud to be British. I think it's a fantastic thing. I absolutely love this country. I'm desperate to get myself one of those blue passports. I unfortunately renewed my passport just before the 2016 referendum, so I've got this purple one for the next couple of years. But that's what I think it means. I think it means for the Conservatives, it's about anyone from anywhere can have the opportunity to succeed and giving people that chance. I'm a young councillor. I'm the youngest councillor in Harrow Council. I wouldn't have got there if people hadn't given me the opportunity.
Hmm.
And I'd like to think that people are seeing I can deliver that because in my first year as a councillor, I've done more emails than there are constituents in my ward. I've been to more events than you can shake a stick at. And I think at one point I even calculated I was doing 30 odd hours a week as a local councillor on top of a full-time job and obviously my private life as well. So I think, when you're getting to the point of doing 60, 70 hours a week to try and make a difference, I think that's showing what it means.
And what about the bit where it says conserve in being a Conservative? What's your opinion on that? Conserving traditions, customs, and those sort of things, architecture, all of the stuff that we have had up until now.
Absolutely. I mean, look, if I had the opportunity to have a beautiful historic house with, all the architecture and culture in it, I would take that any day. I think there's so many traditions that this country's got, which is brilliant. I work in politics. I work in and around Parliament, and I absolutely love going to that building and seeing the history, being at the heart of history.
Mm.
And I think this country's got so many things to be proud of. You look at the royal family and you look at the traditions and all of the different things that you would never have expected to still be around in the 21st century. But there they are, traditions that are hundreds of years old. Look at the coronation we had this year. That was a moment that for all of us to remember. So I think that there is so much that this country's got to keep and so much that we must not, just bulldoze through and build new. I think it's important that, we consider what this country has already.
Well, I know that a number of my audience, and I know this, will perhaps take issue with you about the royals and the current king, but that's another story. So I
Well,
won't
I
go
can
into
come
that.
on again and we can discuss
We
that.
can
I'm more than
we can
happy to.
absolutely more than happy. That would be an interesting discussion. But I just thought I better register that I know that there will be people who will be, oh, hold on a minute, that's a can of worms. But anyway, so let's go back to then the Conservative Party as a party. It seems to me, And do correct me if I'm wrong. And what's lovely is, can I ask how old you are?
I'm 24.
24. Okay. Well, I'll be 60 this year. So there's a little gulf of distance of time between us. It seems to me that the Conservative Party does not represent what perhaps when I was 24 I would have been voting for. They seem to have completely lost the plot, and I think a lot of people will agree with that. They also seem to be very dictatorial. It seems to be a tyrannical system that we have at the moment. They're not listening to the public, and I would also say the MPs are not listening. And there's a number of problems, as I know you're well aware, and I only want to mention, well, we'll get into three of them, but two of them I just want to mention partly, that if the Conservatives want to get back in, there seems to me three immediate policies that they should do something about. And the first one is, I think, the migrant crisis, that they seem so inept. And let me put it this way. If the Conservative Party or the Prime Minister, the office of the Prime Minister, the Cabinet, was able to lock people down in their houses and prevent them from going out into the street, or even sitting in the sunshine and having a cup of coffee for less than an hour, and then those people being arrested. If the power that the government has to do that to their own citizens, then I think that they ought to be able to turn people around in rubber dinghies who are coming across the English Channel. It just seems strange that we don't have that power. That would be one thing. And I'll get you to respond in a second. And the second thing, I think that the government are in a very awkward situation, having pushed us down the road of having a certain medical intervention. I'm nervous about saying what it is in actual terms because of terms and conditions of YouTube, and I know how sensitive they are, but they do not seem to acknowledge that there was any problem, certainly the amount that Andrew Bridgen brought to the attention, and that everything is safe and effective, we hear all the time. And that if they were to acknowledge that perhaps they got it wrong and pay the money that perhaps they're putting into something like NetZero, which is the third policy, towards those people who have been affected and damaged by the medical misinformation, then I think they've got a chance that the public would actually say, oh, okay, they put their hand up, they've done something wrong, they're doing something about the migrant crisis, maybe we'll let them get in. So on the first two policies, just briefly, what do you say to that perhaps harsh attack from me?
Yeah, so I mean, I completely understand, and from my point of view, freedom of speech is so important. I, as a local councillor, often get painted with the same brush as, oh, all you Tories, all you Conservatives, you all do this, you're all that, you're all in it for each other. Well, sorry, but during the pandemic, I was doing exactly the same as many other people were. I was looking after loved ones, I was caring for people, I was helping, do phone calls for the vulnerable and those who were isolated, was playing my part, I'd like to think, in what I was, what we were all going through, the whole world was going through. But I think it's really important as we learn those lessons afterwards, we have to be open and say mistakes may have been made, things may have been going wrong, but there wasn't a rule book, there wasn't a playbook for the worst pandemic in a century. And I think we've got to be really careful that we don't go down the line of trying to find scapegoats, trying to, say it should have been perfect, we should have done, better. When these are things that firstly we didn't get the facts and information in the first place from China or from the WHO, and secondly we, as I said, there was no rule book. There's no rule book on how to deal with the worst pandemic in over a century. So
But if
you
you
have
if
to go
you
off of what you have at the moment.
and I completely agree with that, and that I don't have an argument against that particularly. But if you start to hear that things went wrong and you made big mistakes, instead of doubling down and going, no, it's all safe and effective, and we're going to not only vaccinate elderly people or those with comorbidities, but we're actually going to vaccinate pregnant mothers with a experimental drug that had never, which ordinarily you wouldn't vaccinate pregnant mothers with, and yet in this instance we're going to do. And then we start getting to reports, which if you look anywhere other than mainstream media or within the House of Commons, you'll see the stories from all over the world of these strange harms and damages that have happened to people. And yet the government will not even recognise or explore it as a possibility. To me, that seems extremely wrong.
I mean, I think there are lessons to be learned, and this is what the inquiry is going to find out over the next few years. It's going to look at every detail and leave no stones unturned. We've seen how much they're trying to find out passwords for phones and that sort of thing in the last few weeks. But I think, you're right. It's important where mistakes were made to acknowledge them. And I think it's really vital that we understand that the rule books weren't just, we didn't just rip up what you're supposed to go through. The vaccines, for example, they still had to go through checks and balances. They still had to go through the testing and those sorts of things. It's not like something was just cooked up in the back of in a basement and then jabbed into everybody without.
Well, we know it certainly wasn't cooked up in the back of a basement, and there is, of course, evidence that it had been around well before the virus was even a thing. But let's not go down there.
Mean, I think the point is, we're going to find out these mistakes and these lessons. And I think it requires the government to be really open and say, yes, mistakes were made. We acknowledge that, but we're going to put this and that in place for the future. And I think what will be the testament of the pandemic is how the UK is prepared for the next pandemic, because there will be more. But, it's a harsh reality to say there are going to be future pandemics.
Why do you say that there will be more?
Well, I think it's one of those things where we do realise, as there are more people on the planet, as antibiotic resistance increases with the use of antibiotics for nearly everything, there is the chance that a pandemic will come again. And we've got to be really careful about that.
Seeing as this is the first worldwide pandemic with the first absolute rollout of one medicine for every single person. I mean, you can't tell me that this one medicine that has been, if we accept the current narrative that within 12 months a medicine had been created that anybody in the world, wherever they are, despite the climate, despite their living conditions, despite their traditions and customs, despite whether they're pregnant or not, should have this one medicine. I mean, it's never been done before. It's clearly not sensible to do that way, and hopefully we've learnt that lesson. But I'm curious, and I know we're going to get onto the NetZero stuff, and we will, and I don't want you to be squirming too much under my
look, as a politician, it's what you've got to do. You answer the difficult questions, and you do it honestly.
Brilliant. And so I'm curious because we keep hearing now, there's going to be another pandemic. And seeing as when was the last one? The 1920s. There may have been some smaller ones, but not big ones like this. It is strange that we are talking as if these things happen several times in a lifetime. I mean, the next one, if we go by the past, might not be here for another 20, 30, 40 years. But it always feels like there's one coming next week.
I definitely agree that, the sense of panic and the sense of, the urgency of time is something that's really grown in in media and in common conversation. I definitely, I don't like that. I think what's important to note, though, is the amount of things that have happened that could have. So obviously, do you remember Ebola? We had SARS, we had swine flu, bird flu, all of these different things that could have been
but didn't.
Early COVID, but they didn't for whatever reasons. But that doesn't mean that they weren't there, and it doesn't mean that they may not have, they could have been. So I think that's what's important to realise, that we had the what was it? Was it monkeypox or something earlier?
Monkeypox, yes.
Last year, and that's again something which.
But isn't it the fact that these outbreaks don't ordinarily happen turn into a pandemic? I mean, isn't that the case then, to say, well, normally they don't? So why are we panicking?
Well,
why are we going to the extreme? Why is the WHO taking our sovereignty away, for example, and saying, actually, we'll be in charge of what we do, what the response is? I mean, all of this is a nonsense.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly the thing. We need to not panic and we need to carry on with normal lives. And it brings me to a point actually about the WHO trying to bring in this ridiculous thing that they can just implement lockdowns without the will of governments. I mean, I think
Mm.
that's utterly ridiculous, and I hope that the Conservative government stands up to this and says not a chance. Because it's for our, governments to decide. It's for us as the public to have a say in.
Well,
But
I don't you think it's up for us to decide and the government to implement, not the other way around?
not a complete. And look, I'm not a scientist. I'm not going to
No,
pretend
no,
that
but
I
my
can.
point is that all government ministers are the people's servants.
Yes,
I mean,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
we shouldn't be governed if you take it from like we're telling you what to do. The people are the sovereign people. It, Somebody like you is asking for us to vote you in. We're giving you the authority to carry out our duties. Is that not the case?
No, I completely understand that. How you've laid it out there. What I was trying to say is the
I'm already
fact.
saying how it
No,
how
no,
I mean
I understand. What
the
I'm
people
trying to
give the
say
MPs the
is
authority, don't they?
yeah, and that's the whole point of democratic, free, and fair elections. And what I'm trying to say is that these extraordinary circumstances, which hopefully, touch wood, we don't
Never happen
have
again.
for, hundreds and we don't have again, but
Mm,
we've got to face up to the reality that there is always a chance that
sure.
we could have another pandemic. And I think it's what's most important is that we learn the lessons from the pandemic. We give this inquiry as much space as it needs to get to the bottom of it, and that we make those changes. It's all right to produce the 300-page report and a 50,000 word essay on what we're going to do. Actually do it. That's the most important thing, delivering on what you say you're going to do.
And fine, let me just ask this one last question on this, and then we'll move on to the wonderful policy of net zero.
Oh, yes.
And the question is, if let's say there is another pandemic, do you think the public would like a conservative government to care for us during that?
I'll be honest, I don't think it matters. I think what's important is the fact of dealing with the information you have at the time and putting, people first. I think that's the
Right.
most important thing. I don't think pandemics and health, viruses and things like that. That's not a political issue.
No, no, it shouldn't be. I'm just thinking that people might think, this is what the Conservatives did us before. But then
Yeah,
We did hear
well,
also
this
what
is the
Labour
thing.
wanted.
There will be people who say that. There'll be people who think that. There'll be people who have that in their minds. Okay for them. From my point of view, if I were in those positions at that time, and if I were having to make these difficult decisions, I'd always make sure it is done for the best of the people. And I'd hope that whatever color party, whatever part of the governments you're in, you'd have that same belief and same integrity.
Okay, let's go to net zero because this is a policy that is
Do
already
we have
hurting.
to?
Yes, I'm so sorry. We have to. This is the policy that is hurting people right now
It
with the
is.
cost of living and everything else, and the fuel prices are going up, and we're being pushed. I mean, we saw the King launch that ridiculous countdown to lower emissions to 1.5. Um,
Well, the yes, and I think the thing with net zero is this is something far in the future, far away, that not everybody is unanimous behind, that governments now are pushing back on. We only have to look on the continent for that. And yet we're facing the pain of it today in our bills. And I think that's something which we really need to review.
So, can I ask the first fundamental question then? And I'm just going to tell my audience this, by the way. I don't have any questions set in front of me. I don't come to my interviews prepared to do anything. These are just as it happens. My first fundamental question then is to you, Matthew. Do you believe that the planet is warming up due to man-made stuff? Is it
I think
man-made global warming?
man-made we are having an impact on global warming. Absolutely. I was invited to COP 26, and I saw the models and the things that are being done to show firsthand what's going on. It's undeniable that we are having an impact, whether it is.
By how much?
Well, this is the point. Whether it is our faults or whether it's the faults of generations before us is another question. So, I'd like to think that the current generation are, aware of the things that we can do and are having nowhere near as much of an impact as, say, the Industrial Revolution's generation. I think it's important that we put these things into perspective and realize that there is a lag in this information.
Okay. So there'll be a number of people who can argue about the science, or whether when you went
Absolutely.
to which COP was it,
26, so the one in
20,
Glasgow.
20, yeah. So presumably they're not going to put forward the science that says there's no such thing as global warming. So
Well, you
being
can you can imagine though that there were many other events in the city at the time giving those opinions, and I'd like to be someone of all different points of views and opinion. So I
yes,
made sure to go in and try and speak to people, to listen to them, to hear their points of view and understand. I don't think it's good for anyone to focus solely on one part of information. I think it's really important you've reached a whole spectrum.
right. So I mean, either way. We saw how the government likes to say there is the science,
Yeah.
and they did that during the pandemic. There was only one opinion, and it seems that we now have a government that has the same basic idea that there is only one science, and therefore we're going to follow this. And as a result of that, we have this exciting policy of net zero, in which we're going to remove people's cars, persuade them to, well, it may not be persuading, force them perhaps is better, to get rid of their gas, what do you call them, the heaters,
Yeah.
and replace them with pumps,
Heat pumps and
heat
ground source
pumps,
pumps and stuff like that. Yeah.
and all of this. And now we've got Michael Gove saying, oh, well, actually, now that the Conservative Party is sort of on the rocks, really, maybe maybe we should pull back a little bit from this policy. Is that him just really just saying that because he wants to save the Conservative Party, when presumably he knew this was a ridiculous and wouldn't work? The mathematics of the whole thing is just ridiculous. We can't get everybody in EV cars. We
Mm.
can't heat up we can't provide the electricity through wind farms and solar powers. Surely somebody like him in the days of Boris, when the dishevelled prime minister called Boris was there, he must have known that again. And if he didn't know, why didn't he know? Because I would have thought there should have been some consultation to say, actually, the cost benefit analysis just shows this is actually not physically possible to do between now in the next 7 years. Why is it that he's saying what he's saying now, and should we carry on to this net zero policy?
Well, look, there needs to be a lot more carrot and a lot less stick. What we're seeing is a government running after the green agenda without putting it to the people, without saying, is this what you want? And it is having an impact right here, right now on everyone's bills. And let's not deny the images that we're seeing in Greece and the wildfires that we had in the UK last year are incredibly distressing. But we've got to remember that people right now, right here, right now, are suffering with the cost of living. And to add green levies onto their bills, to add additional, measures, sticks of you only have a few more years left to change your gas boiler. You need to increase your house to a higher EPC rating, or else you're never going to be able to sell it. You're never going to be able to rent it. The ULEZ and other, air emission schemes to an additional tax, £4,500 a year on someone. These are schemes that the ULEZ, for example, will have a negligible impact on air quality, but it will have an impact on their livelihoods and their freedoms and their finances. So what I think Gove is doing, and you're right, the Conservative Party is on the rocks, and we really need to have a look in the mirror. I think Gove is pulling out that mirror, and saying, what are we doing? Let's look in the mirror. What are we supposed to be? What party are we? And what direction do we want to be heading in? Because when I'm on the doorsteps, people aren't saying, "Oh, I can't wait for that net zero 2030. I want it quicker. Bring it to 2025. Let's get it now." People
Do
aren't saying
they do they believe it? Do they believe well? Do they believe it's possible, and do they believe it's necessary?
the thing is, it's a problem for tomorrow, right? People are focused right now on their
Mm.
bills. They're focused on their local area. Me as a local councillor, they're focused on getting potholes filled. They're focused on council tax being reasonable price for the services they get. They're focused on being able to get through to the council when something goes wrong. That's what people are focused on the
Mm.
ground. And we saw that in the Uxbridge by-election. People were not focused on the things of 10, 15, 20 years time. They were focused on the ULEZ, which is coming in a matter of days. They were
Yes.
focused on, the Hillingdon Hospital, getting that built as quick as possible. They were focused on the police station that Sadiq Khan decided to close, and then miraculously, during the middle of a by-election, decided he was going to reopen it again. That's what people are focused on. They're focused on the everyday issues. And I know the last question you asked me was about three different points, and one of them was immigration.
Mm.
That's another thing people are focused on. They're focused
Yeah.
about immigration, about the country sorting it out, stopping these illegal migrants coming over, actually using the natural defense we have of a moat. We're an island, we have a moat around us, and
Mm.
actually making sure that the homeless here in the UK, our veterans and our war veterans have homes and roofs over their heads, and making sure that we as a country have not only the infrastructure that we need for the number of people that are here, but also the infrastructure for the number of people that are going to be here because we want children and we want to have future generations as well.
The thing is that, I mean, everything you say there, and I hope you don't take this the wrong way, it sounds very like a politician, because politicians say all of this. What they can't do is sort of break out and actually say what they really think or what they really feel. We know we've got this moat. We know there's a trouble with people coming in. We know that our future is under threat by people coming from different societies with different cultures and different backgrounds, not respecting our own cultures and traditions. We know this,
Yeah.
and yet people keep saying the same thing and saying, "Oh yeah, but we know, we've got this. We should be able to." Months go past, weeks, years go
And
past, and
nothing changes.
and nothing changes. So here we go. You're the prime minister now. Let's just escalate. You've gone in a time machine. You've aged a little bit, so that
Thanks.
you're no longer 24, the youngest prime minister in the country, but you're a bit older. Let's say you're, I don't know, it doesn't matter, but you're
20,
prime
25.
minister. Yeah, you're 25. There you go. And you're prime minister. And how would you now get the Conservative Party to an electable and trustworthy party? What will you do?
We've got to focus on the everyday issues. We've
Yeah,
got to
no, but
focus
what
on.
I'm asking you, what will you do? Not what we've got to
Yeah,
do.
so
What will
okay,
you do?
so that's what I mean. I want to have. I'm a conservative that wants to focus on the things that really matter to people right here, right now.
Yes,
So that's stuff
yes.
like immigration. I want us to actually deal with this problem.
So hang
Actually,
on.
for
So
once,
you're saying I want, I want. I'm getting you as prime minister now to commit. So here we are. You're in the prime minister's, that stupid mainstream media sort of whatever you call it, conference room, wherever it is
oh,
that he delivers.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that. And so instead of saying I want to focus on, which is all very politician wording. So if I was the prime minister, I say I will do this, and I'm going to I will get rid of the green levies. I'm going to abandon net zero. I will turn every boat round, and we will use the navy. We will turn them
Yeah.
back. We're going to just turn them back. We're not
Well,
having it.
there we go. Look, you basically are clearly my deputy prime minister. I want we're going to turn the boats back. The navy should be in the channel at the moment already. We need to have returns policies with not only Rwanda but other countries as well. We need to have a deal with France to actually stop migrants using the illegal channels coming over in these boats in the first place. There's immigration routes at the moment. If you apply for an application and the answer is no, well, I'm sorry, the answer is no. That's
Yeah.
it. And we're seeing
And net
too many
zero.
people
What would you do
bypass the
for
system.
net? What would you do for net
The
zero?
green levies have to go. Net zero 2050 or gone, not 2030. And we need more carrot, less stick. We can't force people to make these changes. We have to bring people with us. And that's what I want. The ULEZ expansion doesn't work in outer London. It's purely a tax. Let's call it for what it is. We need Parliament, Parliament, MPs, the government to focus on crime, tackling crime so everyone feels safe where they live, women and girls feel safe to walk the streets, that sort of thing. We need to focus on, our culture and making sure that there's cohesion in our society. We need to build houses, build more houses. So, Gove announced today the homes plan for getting the government to build 1 million houses and 300,000 houses and all of these different policies. Right, well, deliver it then. That's what we want to see because it's, this is where the Conservatives have got themselves to, making all of the promises, saying everything that people would think they want to hear, but they're not delivering on them. And we need to deliver and actually have, some trust back in politicians that when you put something in your manifesto, you're going to deliver it.
Matthew, would you like to be Prime Minister?
I would love to one day, but
Yeah,
right
I'm
now,
not. I don't have the magic wand. I'm ever so sorry.
but no, but look, I think if you ask most people, they'd say yes, I would love to. The point for me is right now, I love what I'm doing. Where I am in Harrow, where I am in Hatchend as a local councillor, I'm turning a disused field into a park that future generations are going to enjoy. I'm sorting out our high street so that all of our businesses have, things that are there supporting them. I'm trying to reconnect residents associations and residents groups with business traders. I'm trying to bring in, cycling schemes and things like that for our local area that complement where the cars want to go. Trying to bring in wildflower meadows, those sorts of things. That's the everyday stuff, and that's what I wish government would focus a bit more on. The stuff that people see when they wake up in the morning and open their eyes and go out onto the front door, instead of the stuff that's 20, 30, 40 years away, but we're going to pay for right now. That's the government that we all want, surely.
Yeah, no, I agree. More wild meadows. Absolutely with you there. And I think what you just the last bit there has really been of particular interest to me. Seeing stuff happen and knowing that there are people there who are listening, because that's the thing that
You
seems to
you
be
asked
missing.
me about trust and integrity. I think trust and integrity comes from delivery, keeping promises and actually delivering on them, and
Yes,
listening. So, if I were the mayor of London, as soon as the results of that consultation came through, 66% said no to ULEZ, done. I'm not
it's
doing
gone.
ULEZ expansion. And I think that's where we got to get back to. We've got to get back to politicians of all colours actually listening to the people. That's been my tagline for the last however many months since that people's question time. Listen to the people. And I think that's what Michael Gove and the Conservative Party has started doing this weekend after Uxbridge. They realised listening to the people, listening to the voters, getting in touch with what really matters to them, that's how you win. And I think that's what Michael Gove has started the firing gun on.
Well, let's hope that continues, the listening process, and that there are more people like you who are reporting back up the chain to say, "Hey, this is what people really think," and you've got to listen to them rather than dictate to them. Matthew, I really appreciate your time coming
No, I'm
on,
very grateful.
and
Thank you very
and
much.
I'm sorry for the difficult questions,
No,
but you know,
look, difficult questions are part of it, and I think it's just fair to be true and honest about what I think and what others think. And that's the thing. I say there are no difficult questions, but every question's got an answer. So I'm happy to give one.
fantastic, brilliant. Well, thank you very much. I
All the
appreciate
best.
that. Be interesting to see the comments. So do leave them down below, and I'll be back with more interviews and monologues and opinions and things in the future. But in the meantime, from Matthew and myself, thank you for watching. Good luck, Matthew, with everything you're doing. Till next time, bye for now.